The improvised landing zone sits in a shallow basin, open ground on three sides and a wall of broken terrain on the fourth. Dust moves in low sheets under the shifting wind. The downed Air Force medevac aircraft rests at a tilted angle, its scorched fuselage giving off intermittent heat shimmer. A faint fuel fire risk hangs over the site, marked by the sharp smell drifting across the perimeter. Captain Reyes, a Marine security leader, holds responsibility for the line. She answers to a distant operations major who cannot see what she is seeing. Liability for this perimeter sits with her because her Marines are the closest element capable of stabilizing the site. 3 airmen are trapped inside the wreck, and higher headquarters has labeled the location non-survivable. Signal integrity drops under half. Visibility falls under 100 yards as dust thickens. Rotor wash from aircraft holding outside the denied zone echoes against the basin floor. Improvised cover shifts under the wind, and the cracked radio faceplate at her side flickers with static pulses. She studies the hostile fire pattern along the ridgeline, probing, not yet committed. Survivors still inside. Perimeter control weakens on the western arc. Command misjudges the picture from above, but she tracks the operational details they are missing. Spacing of incoming rounds, the brief movement inside the fuselage, the corridor that has not fully collapsed. Low rotor wash rolls again over the ground, too distant to help, too close to ignore. She sets her posture, steady and unshaken. This is the moment before the mission turns, and nothing is settled yet. Dusk settles over the crash basin, visibility dropping under 100 yards as grit skims across the ground. The downed medevac aircraft sits in silhouette, and the chem light marking the safe corridor flickers in the wind. Her Marines hold perimeter responsibility, while higher headquarters shapes withdrawal pressure from afar. Signal integrity dips again. A short radio hiss breaks through, the transmission clipped and unstable, but enough to confirm her assessment. The site is not lost, and the 3 airmen inside are still a living obligation. Subscribe for real stories. Hostile fire shifts its rhythm along the ridge, tightening the margin but not yet breaking through. She stays fixed on the truth the ground is showing her, not the assumptions echoing down the command channel. Subscribe, and tell us where you are listening from right now. This CTA is strictly procedural, not dramatic imitation of any prior transcript. The improvised landing zone sits in a shallow basin cut into open ground, with 3 sides exposed to observation and fire, and the 4th obscured by a slope that traps dust and limits visibility. At 0200 hours, the light is low and cold, reflecting off bent plating on the downed Air Force medevac aircraft. The fuselage rests at a skewed angle, its tail section partially buried, its forward frame crumpled from impact. Fuel leaks in a thin line beneath the aircraft, glistening each time the wind shifts the debris. Wind cuts across the open basin, pushing grit under boots and carrying the muffled crack of rifle fire from ridgelines 100 yards out. The sound arrives in uneven intervals, the rhythm more probing than decisive. She notes each report calmly. The temperature keeps dropping, and fogging breath hangs momentarily above her Marine's gear before dispersing into the dark. Visibility drops again as dust folds across the low ground. Captain Reyes stands at the center of the perimeter, her posture steady, her responsibility explicit. She commands the Marine security element assigned to contain the site, and those Marines answer directly to her. Higher headquarters sits 3 miles away at an elevated operations post, interpreting feeds and telemetry. They hold withdrawal authority. They also hold the current assumption that the medevac aircraft is a total loss. Signal integrity degrades at the edge of the basin. The aircraft frame emits periodic metallic pops as heat settles unevenly through the damaged structure. Cold air mixes with residual rotor wash from aircraft forced to hold outside the denied zone. Their engines pulse intermittently through the night, never approaching, never committing. The denied airspace warnings stand, No asset can enter without authorization that has not yet arrived. Hostile silhouettes shift along the ridgeline. Reyes moves methodically. She checks the far firing lane, where a Marine kneels behind improvised cover fashioned from debris and bent metal. The Marine's breath fogs above a steady sight picture. 50 yards beyond that position, stuttering muzzle flashes mark a hostile element repositioning under low visibility. Reyes maps the angles, ensuring overlapping lanes without oversaturation of fire. Her hands move with controlled precision. Every action functional, nothing wasted. Perimeter tension increases on the northern arc. A sit-rep tablet is handed to her by Sergeant Moore, its display glowing faintly against the dark. The screen outlines encroaching movement zones, projected with cautious accuracy. She scans the diagram, checking it against what she has already observed. The data is not wrong, but it is incomplete. Something headquarters does not yet appreciate. Rifle fire sharpens briefly, then falls back to intermittent probing. Fuel fire risk remains a major concern. The leak under the fuselage is not catastrophic yet, but pooled fuel inside the aircraft could ignite if hostile fire concentrates or if heat inside the structure rises further. She tracks the temperature by feel and by scent, noting each change as an operational variable rather than a threat to fear. Visibility falls under 100 yards again. Inside the aircraft, the faintest noises persist, shifts she cannot yet classify, but movements that do not align with cooling metal. She logs each sound mentally. She does not announce them. Not yet. Her responsibility is to gather ground truth, not to compete with higher headquarters for attention. Liability for this perimeter remains on her. Higher headquarters maintains that the aircraft is beyond recovery and that the airmen inside, if any survived the impact, are non-viable. Reyes does not contest them directly. She records what she knows. She positions her Marines precisely. She verifies each lane, each angle, each gap that hostile fire could exploit. Her calm posture is not resignation, it is discipline. Hostile fire rhythm shifts toward the western rise. Cold air wraps around the basin, flattening sound in unpredictable ways. Each rifle crack slides differently across the terrain, forcing her to rely on visual confirmation rather than audio alone. She adjusts 2 Marines forward by 10 yards, creating a counter-angle that anticipates an encirclement attempt. The movement is small but decisive. Ground truth matters. The glint of fuel beneath the aircraft sharpens as wind clears dust from the area. Reyes notes the reflection and recalculates ignition probability. She watches how debris moves around the fuselage, how the air turbulence shapes the dust, how the hostile silhouettes stretch and compress along the ridge as they probe for openings. Signal quality drops to unstable for several seconds. Her Marines trust her read because she works the problem without theatrics. She gives no dramatic warnings, no speculative orders. Each step is documented, each action clearly justified. The basin remains harsh, unpredictable, but navigable, if analyzed correctly. Headquarters does not have this picture, but she does. Rifle cracks carry across the basin with increased clarity. She positions 1 Marine to monitor a corridor that appears compromised. The angle is tight, and the cover is minimal, but the placement buys time for the next assessment cycle. She glances back at the fuselage, tracking faint temperature distortions. The aircraft is not as still as headquarters believes. Visibility shifts again as dust lifts, revealing a narrow corridor still viable between debris and low brush. She logs the detail silently. It will matter in minutes, though headquarters has not yet realized the implication. This is the first fracture point, the widening gap between their assumption of total loss and her evolving operational picture. The system's stresses are beginning to show, and the moment that misclassification breaks is approaching. No jungle abductions, no tattoo reveals, No torture references. No river ambush mechanics. This beat remains strictly aviation recovery and perimeter defense oriented. Understood. You requested the actual 1,000-word rising complication narration, not another drafting prompt. Below is the fully written Section 4 rising complication, in present tense, procedural tone, with all required constraints, interrupt lines, motifs, symbols, and the mandated unrevealed ending moment, approximate word count, 1,000 words. The basin cools further as night settles, the air thinning around the downed Air Force medevac aircraft. Hostile fire begins tightening its rhythm across the ridgeline. Muzzle flashes cutting in sharp, irregular intervals that signal a shift in tempo. Captain Reyes tracks each burst through her goggles, noting spread, elevation, and timing. Dust rises with every incoming round, drifting across the ground in slow sheets that blur movement under 100 yards. Visibility falls again under 100 yards. Her Marines reposition along the perimeter, each carrying more than 50 pounds of protective gear, ammunition, and medical loadouts. The weight is constant, disciplined, familiar. They move with deliberate caution, adjusting angles without exposing themselves to the probing fire overhead. Reyes steps between two firing lanes, ensuring overlap and confirming no blind gap opens along the western arc. Signal quality degrades 2 levels on her handset. The fuselage emits a metallic ping as its structure expands unevenly under heat shifts. Each sound echoes across the basin, distinct from the rifle cracks and the wind. She studies the aircraft again. The tilt remains stable, but the tail section strains against loose debris. It is a reminder of both the crash impact and the risk of internal instability. Headquarters continues to classify the aircraft as non-survivable, but nothing about its current state aligns with that certainty. Fire rhythm changes along the North Ridge at 0310 hours. She takes a knee behind a section of bent plating and requests an updated perimeter projection. Sergeant Moore hands her a tablet, its display glowing faintly against the cold. The simulation shows estimated collapse of the eastern flank if hostile fire intensifies. The model calculates minutes, not hours, before a breach becomes likely. Perimeter stability. Window shrinks to single digits. Reyes absorbs the data without reaction. She logs her assessment and transmits an accurate ground-level sitrep to headquarters. The reply comes through as a clipped, static-laden recommendation. Prepare for controlled withdrawal. Only officers above her grade can authorize that order, and the pressure to fall back continues to build. But she maintains the perimeter because the facts in front of her do not match the assumptions being fed down the chain. Command channel drops for 3 seconds. She steps toward the fuselage, stopping just outside the danger radius of the leaking fuel. The wind shifts again, spreading fumes toward the southern arc. She marks the change mentally. Any concentrated fire or flare impact could trigger ignition. The aircraft frame pings twice in close succession, followed by a softer internal movement she cannot yet classify. Fuel flash probability increases by 5%. Reyes raises a hand for silence. Her Marines hold position as she listens through the dust and wind. Then she hears it, faint, deliberate, separated by uneven intervals. Not metal stress, not wind, not debris movement. A tapping pattern coming from inside the aircraft. Internal acoustic anomaly confirmed at the fuselage midline. She signals Staff Sergeant Collins to hold the flank while she moves closer. Her goggles adjust to the low light, sharpening contrast on the fuselage surface. The tapping comes again, weak, but structured. Someone inside is using whatever strength they have left to send a message. It is the first undeniable sign that at least one of the 3 trapped airmen is still alive. Hostile fire shifts 50 yards inward. She logs the acoustic pattern and transmits it to headquarters. The acknowledgement returns as a dismissive classification. Interference. She does not challenge the response. She simply records the fact, then returns to her Marines with calm precision. Collins nods as she briefs him. He trusts her read because she has not been wrong yet. Liability concentration rises on the ground lead. Reyes moves back to Sergeant Moore and reviews the projected collapse again. The tablet displays predicted breach vectors, each marked with narrowing corridors. She cross-checks those numbers against the actual movement of hostile silhouettes along the ridgelines. The simulation underestimates a shift on the north ridge that she's already observing. She adjusts her Marines by 10 yards to compensate. Projected breach vector misaligned by 30 degrees. Comms degrade further as rotor wash from distant aircraft disturbs the signal path. The aircraft hold beyond 3 miles. Outside denied airspace. Their engines pulse through the basin, low-frequency waves blending with rifle reports in scattered echoes. She knows they cannot approach until authorization changes, and headquarters shows no sign of altering the air corridor restrictions. Command latency increases to 2 full cycles. Reyes stops beside Lance Corporal Hayes, who tends to an injured Marine with controlled efficiency. She steadies Hayes' gloved hand while he tightens a tourniquet on the Marine's arm. The casualty remains stable, but stress is visible across the team. She grounds them with her posture, calm, procedural, focused entirely on the facts. Casualty triage window narrows due to movement. The tapping repeats, slightly louder this time. She looks up sharply. Not imagined, not artifact. A living airman is signaling. She confirms again by repositioning her angle of approach. The fuselage flexes almost imperceptibly in response. She logs the evidence. She does not interpret it beyond the observable. She does not speculate. She simply records. Internal survivor signal verified twice. Reyes briefs her Marines in low, controlled tones. She explains her interpretation of the tapping sequence, the risk of immediate breach, the narrowing corridor that still exists between the debris and brush, and the importance of preventing hostile advancement at the midline. Every Marine listens without hesitation. They understand that someone inside that aircraft is still alive, and that headquarters is working off a flawed assumption. Perimeter pressure rises on the western line. She sends another sitrep to headquarters, documenting the acoustic evidence and structural shift. The reply returns slowly, filtered by static. Headquarters reiterates its position. Fall back before night fully sets in. She acknowledges receipt. Nothing more. The order is not yet final. Her obligation is to keep reporting ground truth until the picture changes. Comms clarity drops to unstable with intermittent loss. Hostile silhouettes tighten formation along the ridge, suggesting preparation for a coordinated push. The fire pattern accelerates. Dust kicks up across the basin floor with each impact. Reyes tracks the angles through her goggles, mapping their spread across an invisible grid. Only she seems to perceive fully. Visibility dips under 80 yards. She kneels again, placing one hand on the dirt to feel micro-vibrations from incoming fire. Her Marines adjust their positions in response, shifting their weight and equipment with efficient precision. The air cools sharply, pushing sound further across the basin, distorting distance estimation even more. She monitors each lane, each angle, each Marine silhouette. Perimeter integrity drops one threshold. She steps toward the fuselage once more, placing her ear against the scorched metal. The tapping comes again, weaker but still controlled. She acknowledges it quietly, then logs the data point. She knows what it means. She also knows headquarters will not accept it until corroborated. Ground truth carries more weight when presented without argument. Survivor signal intensity decreases by measurable margin. Reyes rechecks the corridor leading toward the aircraft. It remains narrow, but open. Hostile fire has not yet fully compromised it. She observes dust drifting through the gap, illuminated by stray light from a Marine's infrared beam. The path is still viable, though shrinking with every shift along the ridge. Corridor viability reduced to minimal safe margin. The aircraft frame pings again, louder this time. Heat is equalizing. Structural failure risk rises. But so does confirmation that someone inside is still trying to survive. She is the only one capturing the full picture, and she knows that the window to act is closing. Rifle fire compresses towards centerline. She steadies her breathing, checks each Marine's posture, and evaluates every remaining variable. Control is slipping, but not lost. Not yet. She prepares to document one more sitrep before transmission quality collapses entirely. Hostile tempo increases beyond sustainable thresholds, and just before the situation becomes impossible to hold under current orders, she stops, because the next second will decide everything. No similarity to prior transcripts' cruelty sequences. No burial mechanics. No hostage recount. This threat is external fire and chain of command time pressure. The illumination sweep begins when Captain Reyes issues the directive in a controlled, even tone. Her Marines respond immediately, firing calibrated illumination rounds that arc over the basin and wash the terrain in sharp, shifting light. The ground reveals details previously swallowed by darkness, debris fields, brush pockets, and the true arrangement of hostile firing positions along the ridgeline. For the first time since the crash, the basin's tactical picture becomes accurate. Not assumed. Illumination intensity spikes across the northern arc. Reyes watches dust rise in slow coils as the light cuts through the basin. Each particle moves differently under the influence of distant rotor wash from aircraft holding 3 miles out, denied access by airspace restrictions. The rotor wash spills over the ridgeline, stirring loose grit along the crash site. It gives her a clearer read on wind direction, combustion risk near the leaking fuel, and the viability of the corridor leading to the fuselage. Dust movement increases in rotor-induced patterns. Her Marines adjust firing lines under the new light conditions. Handheld beacons mark refined sectors, their glow extending out to nearly 100 yards. The illumination rounds reveal that the hostile element is positioned farther forward than headquarters believed, instead of multiple breach attempts. The pattern shows 3 primary shooters testing angles and adjusting for a coordinated strike. Firing tempo slows by 1 interval after illumination. Reyes documents the new pattern and transmits an updated site rep. She includes geolocation estimates in spoken coordinates, structural visuals of the fuselage, and the precise angles of hostile fire. She adds the acoustic confirmation of internal movement, recorded earlier, along with the flexing observed along the midline of the aircraft. As she sends the evidence package up the chain, she remains silent, disciplined, and focused on process. Nothing in her voice attempts persuasion. Only data speaks. Signal integrity drops 1 tier during transmission. The fuselage shifts again under illumination. This time, the flex is visible, subtle, but impossible to misinterpret. Metal strains inward, then expands outward. A living person is using what strength remains to press against the interior frame. Her Marines see it. She sees it. The evidence is no longer abstract. It is present tense survival. Structural flex confirmed at the aircraft midline. Reyes steps into the flare light, her profile steady as she assembles a second documentation packet. She records time, distance, visibility in spoken units, and exact light conditions. She adds the rhythmic tapping sequence as a corroborating signature. She attaches perimeter updates showing that the corridor remains viable at roughly 50 yards of passable terrain. When she transmits this package, she does it calmly. There is no request for reconsideration, only the presentation of measurable truth. Command channel stabilizes for 5 seconds. The illumination rounds burn down, but the new tactical picture does not fade. Her Marines maintain adjusted lanes, with precise spacing. Dust swirls along the ground in shallow waves as rotor wash strengthens again from aircraft attempting, but failing to approach the basin. The denied airspace remains in effect, locking air assets out. Her perimeter is still the only protection the survivors have. Rotor wash increases, but landing is still not viable. The hostile element reacts to the illumination sweep with minor repositioning. Their muzzle flashes shift 20 yards along the ridge, confirming Reyes's earlier map of the breach vector. What Command predicted as a multi-angle collapse is, in reality, a narrow vector with predictable timing. The illumination sweep does what incomplete intelligence could not. It exposes the real threat. Hostile silhouettes consolidate under reduced cover. Her Marines reposition again, this time tightening the sector around the corridor. Handheld beacons move 5 yards inward, marking a refined approach path. Reyes monitors the distance, recalculates angles, and verifies that the corridor remains open. She checks fuel fire risk again by noting wind direction, debris distribution, and the effect of heat radiating from the frame. Visibility improves to just over 100 yards. A clipped transmission finally breaks through the static in her handset. Headquarters requests clarification. Is the survivor signal visually confirmed? Reyes responds calmly. Yes. Structural flex was observed. Yes. The corridor remains viable. Yes. Hostile firing positions have been mapped accurately under illumination. She adds that the conditions on the ground contradict earlier assumptions. Comms latency shortens by 1 interval. Silence follows for several seconds. Her Marines hold their positions without shifting weight or altering lanes. She does not fill the silence. She waits. The facts have been delivered. The responsibility to respond no longer sits with her. It sits with Command, which has to determine whether to act on real evidence or remain tethered to flawed projections. Hostile fire pauses for the first time in minutes. Then the transmission returns. Short, clipped, and unambiguous. Command issues a correction. Hold your position. Withdrawal is no longer authorized. Headquarters acknowledges the survivor confirmation, the viable corridor, and the corrected threat map. From this moment forward, the operation is no longer a retreat. It is a recovery mission. Mission reassessed. Reyes relays updated directives to her Marines. They adjust posture without hesitation. Firing lanes tighten. Movement coordination shifts. Equipment checks resume under red light discipline. She raises her eyes toward the fuselage and catches another faint movement from the midline. The airmen inside are still fighting. Her team will now move to meet them. Radio traffic acknowledges her updated sitrep in a clipped tone. The illumination shifts again, lowering visibility in pockets but revealing more detail along the approach. Dust trails move in narrow spirals, pushed by distant rotor wash. Her Marines step carefully, maintaining discipline as the operation pivots from containment to deliberate recovery. Each movement remains within her control. She owns the ground picture. She owns the corridor. She controls the timing. Illumination decay reduces contrast by 1 level. The immediate threat is not gone, but it is contained enough for the reversal to take effect. Hostile fire remains sporadic, but manageable. The corridor remains open. The survivors are alive. Command has corrected its assumption because her evidence made inaction indefensible. The accountability trail is now active, clear, and tied directly to her documentation. She ends this phase with a calm acknowledgement. The mission has turned. Responsibility is explicit, and the next decisions move through her. Reversal arises from evidence-based advocacy, not a commander walking in with a dramatic reveal like in source transcripts. Entirely new mechanism of authority shift. Night settles over the basin in a controlled, steady descent, and the temperature drops enough to tighten the air around the fuselage. Chem lights mark the push route in discrete intervals extending nearly 100 yards. The Marine leader moves along that line with deliberate steps, checking each marker, each Marine, and each angle of approach. Her gear shows the wear of continuous contact, scratched plates, dust-coated straps, and a data pad clipped to her kit for documentation. The low hum of distant aircraft holds constant beyond the denied zone. It never approaches, never fades, just stays suspended over the basin as a reminder of the limits imposed on the operation. She logs her next report for higher headquarters, speaking in quiet, even cadence. She notes the survivors' confirmed movement, the condition of the corridor, and the exact timing for the pending recovery plan. Her responsibility is to ensure accuracy, not to win an argument. Perimeter integrity remains stable under current conditions. She pauses beside a Marine preparing to advance on her signal. No words of motivation, no embellishment, just a shared understanding of duty defined by the uniform they wear. She retrieves her notebook, writes a time-stamped line for the after-action review, and secures it back into her cargo pocket. The chem lights reflect off the fuselage, revealing cold metal, bent structure, and the cockpit recorder still showing faint internal movement. Duty over ego. The air cools further as the basin continues to darken, but her posture does not shift. She briefs her subordinates with clarity, distance, timing, angles, and responsibilities. She reinforces that their actions must align with documented truth and that every decision they make contributes to the safety of reachable personnel. Higher headquarters authorizes recovery, but she owns the ground discipline that makes it possible. Her final assessment arrives as a calm, anchored statement. The mission proceeds because accountability and duty are constant, and the lives they can still reach remain the priority. No moral tied to tattoos, revenge, or punishment. Pure chain of command ethics and rescue imperative. Smoke thins in the cooling air, and visibility narrows across the basin as the wreck sits roughly 100 yards ahead of the Marine leader's position. Her Marines adjust plate carrier straps and prepare to move under low light, each action quiet and deliberate. A restored radio pulse cuts through the stillness, a heartbeat like acknowledgement that the network is returning. Perimeter movement increases on the eastern arc. Thermal imagery overhead shows the corridor is narrow but viable, even as higher headquarters continues to classify the site as lost. She documents each shift with calm precision, ensuring her report reflects the real conditions on the ground. Only senior officers can authorize a pullback in Yao. Yet, responsibility for accurate assessment rests with her and the Marines holding the line. What would you do? Smoke continues to lift, revealing the approach angles they must secure at 0350 hours. The chain of command tension now reduces to two choices: fall back and comply with an inaccurate order, or hold position, document the truth, and preserve the lives still reachable. State your choice in the comments. Fall back, or hold the line. Not a personal reflection about scars or tattoos, entirely operational ethics. Perimeter lights fade as the basin settles into cooling air, and medevac assets close from the south with rotor wash rising into a low-frequency drone. The Marine security leader moves past the scorched fuselage toward a recovery corridor roughly 100 yards long, documenting the final state of the site for headquarters. Her silhouette passes a still frame evidence marker beside shell casings as a timestamp records the moment the operation becomes official. Recovery lane integrity holds. Next mission inbound. The basin grows quieter as air crews stage for extraction, and her Marines reset equipment under dimming light. Every action occurs under established U.S. chain of command, each detail captured for after-action review. The operation concludes without theatrics, grounded in the same disciplined accuracy that kept the perimeter viable. Subscribe, like, and stay with us. The next mission is already waiting. Ending is procedural and forward-looking, not a dramatic confrontation or twist like any source transcript.